So we're starting with Elizabeth here, Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, I figured maybe we should talk about some good news for once. So I thought this was a kind of an interesting article about how these countries down under here managed to improve their posture just over the last 2018 to 2019.
Now you were just there, right?
I was just in New Zealand, and it seemed really sort of behind the times technically in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
It still is. But I think it's interesting that they are really making a push for this. And when I was in New Zealand, I noticed that they have like this list of they're very tight on immigration. Like they won't let you move there unless you have one of a few very narrow areas of skill sets. And one of the most crucial skill sets that they are soliciting people for is cybersecurity, which I thought was interesting because they're really trying to beef up their security posture. So I thought it was pretty interesting. According to this article, they have had quite a bit of success with that. And what it looks to me like from reading this is that it goes back to that old cliche about an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, really, the way that they're doing this is being proactive.
That's awesome.
It does sound great because I know the other way to get in by paying money, and you have to pay a lot of money.
Oh yeah, tons of money.
So, and we're just talking about Trump is more popular than ever, and he might get reelected. So moving to New Zealand is looking more and more appealing.
Yeah,
we have the skill set to move. Hey,
right.
We do. That's an option.
They did have one problem though. They did have a couple problems where it increased, and one of those was contact info breaches, which I mean I feel like that's so common here that it's just matter of fact and barely even gets reported anymore just because it happens every day.
Right.
Yeah. Mostly from just sticking it in the cloud.
Yeah. Well, it's like this article that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Another one.
Another exposure of data.
They didn't seem to know where it came from, though.
Right. So I've been actually on the hunt today to find where this came from.
Interesting.
Following cyber news, trying to follow the rabbit trail. I haven't landed at the end of the tunnel yet. But I found it interesting that this is out there, but nobody seems to know exactly whose account on GCP had all this.
This statement here took me a while to figure out. The data has been wiped, but the database itself remains online and accessible. I guess that means it's still there and somebody might put more data in it.
Right.
So I guess so who would do that? I mean, if a cloud provider wiped it, then they would have deleted the whole thing. If the company wiped it, that would mean they know who it is. Something is wrong with them having this amount of information. This doesn't seem like it can be right anyway. Well, anyway, all right. Now we're down to Kaitlyn.
I'm wondering how they got people's, I'm curious on that story, how they got people's investment data.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big question is whose data, who had the data? Because that's what they're not saying. Because that would be helpful to know.
So it was a bank or something.
Right.
Or maybe one of these credit reporting agencies, because it had investments and mortgage info on it. So that makes me wonder.
Well, it could be stolen data. Crooks have to put it somewhere.
And somebody found it and they didn't secure it. That is something we talked about on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, this has to take a current issue. Are you going to get coronavirus from your box?
Yes. So I've noticed that a lot of the UPS workers and mail workers are delivering packages with their bare hands. And what this article goes into is that there hasn't been a whole lot of studies into this yet. However, a lot of UPS workers and postal workers are going to work while sick. And this is our main point of contact while we are in our homes. Right now, kind of sheltered in place, are these postal workers and delivery people who are delivering our packages, delivering our mail. And so I guess the idea is that you should be disinfecting your packages when you bring them in. Apparently, the coronavirus can actually persist on cardboard for hours, if not days.
Well,
there was wasn't there an article of on the cruise ship?
yeah.
The coronavirus was living for like 17 days after everybody disembarked.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, well, I got an article about that coming up. But here it seems like the simple answer is to just hose down the carrier as they come in the walk up the front.
I actually saw a pretty ingenious solution. This guy had set up like a banker's box for each day of the week. And because it only persists on cardboard for like 24 hours, or I think what I read was up to a max of 3 days. What he does is sprays down the mail when it comes in and then just chucks it into the box and opens it 3 days later. So you open Monday's mail on Thursday and so on.
Yeah, you could just wear gloves when you open it or wipe it down with alcohol or hit it with a flamethrower. There's lots of options.
Or just ignore it. That works too.
Yeah,
I like
that's what I do with all my tax forms.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why, yeah. Anyway, well, it's certainly a timely issue. And so here, I thought this is just awesome. So the leader of Brazil totally says this is garbage, it's all a trick, it's a hoax, totally ignore this coronavirus nonsense and do nothing about it, like Trump did until about a week ago. So the organized crime families have enforced a lockdown. If the government won't do the right thing, we will. So the favelas, which I think is like the drug cartel, said, all right, we own this town. You guys are locking down, which I think is bloody awesome. Anyway.
Somebody's got to do it.
That's right. That's more or less like our nation, where Trump won't do it, but the states do. Anyway.
The only issue that I saw with that was one of the stories I read about that was that, and this may have just been a translation issue or whatever, but one of the stories that I read about it said that some of these gangs were enforcing curfews on people. Like you have to be in your house at 8:00 at night. And an epidemiologist had written something about that when they were discussing maybe doing that here. And that's actually counterproductive when you enforce curfews, because you're in essence like de facto forcing people to go all out at the same hours. So there's less staggering.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, it does make sense that in Latin America, it's the organized crime who handles it and not the government. That is very cliche of Latin America.
Yeah.
And see, here we have a different situation. Our local administrators are less corrupt and the government is the organized crime.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, all right. And so now we got them doing what they said they were not going to do.
More data on that, which I thought was kind of interesting. And according to this article anyway, the cyber attacks have increased 150% in the healthcare sector over the last 2 months. So that's a pretty big jump.
Well, I would expect
and
they're vulnerable.
They've definitely been hitting. Yeah, and they've definitely been hitting hospitals.
You would figure that they're more likely to pay up at this point. They're probably desperate.
Yeah.
So this isn't the same groups who said they wouldn't do this, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Not this one. That other group did start attacking.
Everybody else saw these groups and said, "Oh, if they're not going to attack, I will."
That's true. That's another issue. All you do is you open an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're opportunistic. Yeah.
But one of them that seemed pretty interesting was that they, we've talked about in the past how they've been sending out, fake spam emails with CDC headlines, and they've actually been getting more. They've been getting more sophisticated with that. One of the ones that I read about this week is that they're sending out, this one's been extraordinarily successful because people still don't know not to open email attachments. Essentially, they've been sending out a free ebook from the World Health Organization on the coronavirus. that's got very nasty malware embedded in the Microsoft Word macros and the file that's attached, and it's really successful so far.
That's the rule of social engineering. You just have to get people emotional, and then they will throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt. It's working for our politicians.
It seems to be. All right, and here's, oh yeah, this Windows flaw. This one was pretty amazing.
So it is amazing, and at the same time, it's interesting. I was just reading the email that came out from SANS about this, where, okay, everybody knows that this is a thing, but haven't quite found the malware in the wild, haven't found a proof of concept, but everybody knows it exists, and everybody's saying patch now.
Yep.
And even last night, there was stuff on Reddit of people. Does anybody have the proof of concept for this?
I haven't seen it, but I'm looking for it. But the Adobe Type Manager font. I've heard of these things for like 15 years.
Yeah.
Microsoft font processor flaws.
Yeah.
So there's no patch, but you can disable a service. So that's a good thing.
Right. No, people are looking for a proof of concept for this.
Yeah, that's pretty common. That's when people do this annoying ethical disclosure stuff where they won't give you the code. That's why they've made the magazine POC or GTFO.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a volume 2 now.
Well, but DEF CON, it was funny. They had like 7 extras. I was walking down the hall and I said, I've got 7 last copies of this to give away. And people swarmed him. It was like throwing a cow into a shark tank. He was instantly mobbed. Anyway. All right, and so Kaitlyn, you've got a database in WP Vivid. Oh, this thing.
Oh yeah, the WP Vivid backup database. So if you're using, this should come as no shock to anyone, but there's a critical flaw in a WordPress plugin.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I know, shocker, right? So but this vulnerability is really awesome. So it's in something called WP Vivid, and basically anyone can go into your database and say, set my backup to another location, and this other location can be your own server. So essentially, what you can do is, without any creds or anything at all, you can go in, change the backup location, and just dump everything from the WordPress site onto your own malicious site, which is
awesome.
Yes, it is very awesome. Yes.
Dropbox had one like this for a while. Remember, that's what happened when I first got Dropbox. I said, oh, good. Now there's extra copies of my stuff on like 10 computers everywhere. That'll be great.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, just the other day I was installing it on a new machine and it said, we're only letting you have 3 machines now and you currently have 12. And I'm like, I do? Oh,
this would be a good
machine I've ever owned in a long time was theoretically connected.
So what I do, I dropped Dropbox a long time ago.
Yeah.
I use Nextcloud on just my home server, and it is just fantastic because everything syncs up over the home network, not over the internet, and I control everything. My data is not, I don't know where, it's on the cloud, it's on my computers and my computers only.
But if your house burns down, it's all gone.
Well, yes. there are backups on, because it works just like Dropbox. So any computer that I have the Nextcloud client on, it essentially is another backup.
Yeah.
So it would have to burn down my house, all my computers, everything.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So, but then if you wanted to erase the evidence because the cops are knocking on the door, you'd be hosed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Pros and cons to everything.
So I heard a podcast, a couple of them are talking about how great this article is. So I went and looked at it. They say this is the definitive article explaining what you need to do. He interviewed a lot of real experts. It was in the New York Times yesterday. And so I took a look at it and it is pretty impressive. So he has like things that real experts say you should do. So the first thing is they say you should actually have scientists leading, not politicians. And that sounds good, but good luck with that.
Right.
And the next one is to stop transmission between cities. So he said, and this is the part that got a lot of people's attention. If you could just make everybody stay 6 feet away from everybody else for 14 days, that would be the end of the thing. Because then all the sick people would get really sick and we could hospitalize them and all the rest of us wouldn't get it. That's all you really need if people would actually obey this stuff. So that's a good one. And but of course you need everybody to actually do it. And then to stop transmission within cities, you have to find the hot spots and stop them. So you have to block all these activities, and people adapt to this. In Wuhan, the whole complex will send one person out to get all the food and everything. So almost nobody gets exposed. And you truly have to test a lot of people. And then you isolate the infected. When they get tested, they don't get to go home and infect their family. They have to go to a special clinic. They have tents set up just for the infected people where they will give you treatment. And most of you will just stay in a room that has like an oxygen tank so they can give you oxygen, because you're not going to need a whole intubation. Most people don't, but they can help you a little bit. But the main thing is you don't get around any people that are uninfected until it's over.
Right.
And then they can also transfer you to another clinic. So that's the part they say they just force people to do in China, and they think it'll be hard to force them to do in America, is to rip you away from your family. And you have no choice in the matter. But that, of course, would be more effective from a medical point of view. And then they have these fever sensors everywhere. I remember when I went to China, they got them all over the place, left over from the previous SARS, I think. Every bus, every grocery store, everybody measures your temperature. And if you have a fever, they drag you off to the fever clinic and test you before you can't go home. You're like arrested. And only if you are determined to have something else are you allowed to go home. But if you have this disease, you're kicked off to the special tent and so on. So, and then you trace everybody's contact. They talk about how they taught a class someplace, and when you go to the class, they take a picture to see where you're sitting next to. So 3 days from now, when they figure out someone was infected, they can decide who was sitting next to them and make you go quarantine too, and all that jazz. So, this is how you do it. And this is how they really stopped it in like Singapore and a couple other nations. So, and this is the one that caught my attention. Everybody should wear masks. I wondered about this. In Hong Kong, everybody wears masks. And yet everybody says the ordinary masks that normal people wear don't do anything except stop you from spreading it if you have it. And they say, yeah, that's the point. Everybody wears a mask because otherwise people are afraid to wear a mask because then everybody can tell they're sick. If everybody's wearing them, then the sick people will blend in and wear them. So you're doing it as a sort of social engineering exercise, wearing the mask when you're not sick. And making it normal for everybody to wear a mask all the time, which is a very interesting argument. Maybe I should start wearing a mask.
You should. Oh, well, I was going to say you should.
Well, I thought it was not.
You should, but
this is the first reason I started to do it, because I really don't think I've got it. I don't think I can get it. I think I've already had it. But anyway.
No, you should wear a mask. The problem is there's not enough masks to go around. And the masks that we do have need to go to the medical professionals. And that's why they're saying don't wear a mask, is because they don't want people going out and buying all these masks that we need in hospitals. But ideally, if you have them just laying around, you can't donate them. Yeah, wear a mask.
Yeah, and even the non N95 ones help you from spreading it. What's alarming to me is that you can still transmit it even after you're asymptomatic. And I know, like for me, I've been sick for a month now, and I'm about, I'd say 90%, but I'm still not 100%. And it's crazy because I've never been sick this long in my life. So it makes my biggest concern is potentially spreading it to anyone.
Yeah, well, you're right about that. Yeah, so anyway, I thought this was a very interesting list of considerations. I had not thought of all these things. Of course, I don't think anybody in authority at the national level cares, but I think our local authorities seem to be very intelligent. And so the state of California might actually pay attention to some of this.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what stuff looks like in another couple of weeks.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. I want to see the state's response when Trump really tries to push to sacrifice our grandparents for the economy, and what kind of fights that will ensue.
I think the red states will do it, and the blue states will rebel.
Yeah.
It seems like that's already happening, and one of the disturbing things to me is that it seems like that push started in earnest yesterday, and the markets responded. The investment markets are up quite a bit.
Yeah, because they're hoping this will all just go away. Yeah.
So it's unfortunately an effective political tactic so far.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this one's a pretty good read. This one's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend taking a read through this article. Is about the lengthy saga of a Nigerian cyber scammer, and it's pretty good. It was a guy who was doing it forever. He was doing it like 7 or 8 years, working for one guy, because there are these like cyber criminal overlords that basically run teams of scammers, and this guy, it's sort of like a Matryoshka doll, like a Russian nesting doll, or turtles all the way down. This guy, his boss. So the way the scam works is that the scammer initially makes contact with his victims, gets them to install a remote access Trojan on their machine, and starts taking money from them based on that. Well, to monitor the scammer, the cyber criminal overlord installed a remote access Trojan on his employee's machine. And then, after 6-7 years of just not making very much money, like only a few $100 a year working for this guy, the original scammer decided to strike out on his own. So he never realized that this whole time that his boss had a rat on his machine to monitor him. And so it was still on there. And this guy actually went so far as to contract a developer to develop a custom remote access Trojan to put on his victims' machines. But when he was meeting with the developer, he managed to get the developer's machine infected with the rat that his boss had put on his machine.
There you go. Yep.
Pretty awesome.
Yep.
Wow.
That's why they make good movies about criminals. They make these twisted webs and everybody betrays everybody.
So this article is a good, entertaining read. I recommend it.
And COVID-19 security, although I don't think they're talking about medical security, are they?
No.
Cybersecurity.
Yeah, cybersecurity. This is one of those PSAs. Here's some solid information that isn't scammed information, that isn't going to give you malware.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is the same people who do the Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a link of places to answer questions.
Right.
That's a good thing to have. Good.
Where it's not, you're not running the risk of getting malware off of this stuff.
Okay. And this one was pretty baffling to me. I hope you can explain it. I was doing the CTF for the Pancakes Con.
Right.
I needed to do this and I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know the specifics of how you would, go about doing this, by yourself, but it is kind of a good overview of how a lot of these bugs work. So the idea is that there's a bug in a PHP image uploader script. And what you can do is you can give it a file. You can name it whatever you want, and it'll output as whatever. So you can upload something like mycat.gif, and then upload it as mycat.php. That's a big bug, but the problem is that the developers were smart, and they process the file after you upload it. So they erase all the metadata, they resize it, do all this stuff, and then store it. So the idea that how are you going to put PHP in that in order to run? And what this person did is they found a way to inject PHP in certain sections of an image that are not metadata, that even if you resize the image, even if you change all the stuff about the image, it will still write that small bit of data. And you can use that to essentially do remote code execution on that server.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's part that got a little complicated for me. Some way to hide a PHP inside the image where it doesn't get destroyed.
Exactly. So exactly how this is done. If you look at your screenshots there, it's a bunch of hex dumps looking at like specific bytes where if you change the byte this way, it'll get mixed up. But if you don't change this byte, it'll change the same. It'll stay the same. But the premise is, yeah, you can essentially put data into an image,
Yep.
and you can have it maintained even if you try to strip out all the data or reformat the image.
Well, now that you mention it, I do know this. I was doing something similar in one of my projects. There are parts of an image that are not changed, like the
Right.
metadata. Yeah.
Well, the metadata is changed.
Oh, that's rude. Okay.
Yeah.
There
So
are other parts that go
Yeah,
through.
right. That's why they're going through these lengths, because
Okay.
the metadata is changed. They're like, okay, we know this won't stay, so let's put it somewhere where it will get ignored.
Okay. I thought okay. Anyway, okay. Well, that's good. I feel a little better about it.
Yep.
And this last one I found very interesting. Although I did my thesis on protein work, so that might be why this is interesting to me. But coronaviruses are not alive. Viruses in general are not. They're really just little chunks of like mineral. They only have an effect when they enter a living organism, but when you sneeze them onto the table, they're just like a rock sitting on the table, which is why they can find them lingering for a long time. They don't need to like eat and breathe or anything. They're just like a crystal sitting on the table of RNA. And this means they don't do anything until they enter a living organism. Now, the thing about the coronavirus, the new one, is it infects your nose and your throat, and it does most of its infection there, and it often does not progress to the lungs, which is why a lot of people like me don't get so sick and have to go to the hospital and die and stuff, because it doesn't really attack your lungs. But by infecting your nose and your throat, then you're sneezing it out and infecting the next person, and that's good enough. But so here's the first thing. If it goes deeply in the lungs, then it might kill you. But the other thing about these things is they are very simple. They use RNA instead of DNA. Now, my dad taught me this when I was a kid because he was a biochemist. The DNA is copied to RNA, which is used to make proteins. But when DNA reproduces, there's an error correction code that runs on it to make 100% perfect copies of it. So the mutation rate of DNA-based organisms like humans is incredibly small. Like in this gigantic base sequence of billions of things, you only have like 5 errors when you have children, which is nothing. But RNA-based organisms don't ever correct the errors, and the error rate is pretty high, so they mutate like crazy, which is why the cold will mutate 3 or 4 times in a season, and the cold vaccine doesn't work very well. So this means that it will mutate frequently, and that makes it very hard to make a vaccine. And it also means that within a couple of years, it will be gone. It will have mutated beyond recognition and no longer have the same lethal properties. These things are temporary. And it switches, like say, between alive and not alive. It enters your body, reproduces and mutates. Then when you sneeze it out, it just turns back into an inert crystal, like an egg sitting where it went. Here they are. So anyway, it's very interesting, I think. And they talk about how dengue only had one kind of attack, but the coronaviruses are 3 times bigger, so they have 3 different ways to attack you. So you have to stop them all, and they have more chances to mutate and make a good thing. So they say they're constantly having to develop new antiviral medicines because the viruses are constantly mutating to get past them. So you just have to keep them coming. Anyway, I thought this was quite informative from a biochemical and medical point of view to understand what's going on more, which I like to do. No, the only practical thing that I'm waiting for is the antibody test, which is in development, expected to come out within the next week or so you can prove that you already had it. Mm-hmm. And that is the way to do what Trump wants, which is turn the economy on. If we could just have people prove they are now immune so I can go back to work, then we could have an ever-increasing number of people working without making trouble, and I'd be all for that. I'd like to be one of those people that goes back to work since I'm pretty sure I've already had it, and that is coming.
Right. I'm curious about, there's 2 things I'm curious about. Since they're not alive per se, how does it work that they, quote unquote, die after X amount of time on certain surfaces?
I'm assuming there's just the same way, canned peas go bad. There's just a chance of a degradation, like a mechanical degradation or something washing it away.
Yeah,
or
maybe it breaks down.
Breaking off. Like, if you left sand on the ground, it would eventually break up.
Sure.
And I think they were relatively fragile for mechanical things. So that's why one thing they said about cleaning alcohol-based sanitizers is it doesn't actually attack the virus, but they have like a protein. I think what it does is it cleans those spikes off the end. which
Yeah.
are protein. And the spikes are necessary for it to have its biological effect. So,
That must be why bleach works, but vinegar doesn't for this.
yeah, I don't know. I have read these things. That some things work and others don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in particular, antibiotic soap is not much use at all.
No.
The
Well, yeah.
antibiotics aren't. The soap is good, but the antibiotics are not useful.
Right.
Anyway, I felt happier after knowing that much about it. But anyway, I guess that's it, unless you folks have any more comments. I just want to say my background is better than yours.
No.
Anyway, I'm going to turn off the recording.